Hello and welcome to Steve and Dave's 50 years ago this month. This time around, we're talking about November 1971. Again, a great month for pop and rock. Let's just get into it.
Yeah, let's do. If it's mid-November 1971, then at the top of the charts is Cher with Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. Cher at this point is creating a kind of parallel career, right? In addition to her work with Sonny Bono, she has struck out on her own. And this is, I think for Cher, it's an important song, although not necessarily a song that she's particularly fond of today, but it definitely made an impact back in the day.
Oh, it rejuvenated her career, which had really been languishing. She and Sonny had been out doing small clubs, on tour and kind of developing their shtick that became the Sonny and Cher show, but they were not producing hits. So this really this put her back on the map.
No question, it's a big record for her, and the 1970s would be very, very good to Cher. And so number one is Cher's Gypsy, Tramps, and Thieves. At number two is a song that, well, it's a theme song to a film, and it would be my estimation that this theme song has sort of outlasted the film. At number two is Isaac Hayes's theme from Shaft. Isaac Hayes is a fascinating figure. He was, by this point, by the early 1970s, a real veteran in the music scene. He was a songwriter, a session musician, and a pretty noted performer by this point. Hayes got the go-ahead to write the theme, and one of the things that Hayes wanted to do, in addition to writing the theme to Shaft, was to star in it. Hayes had no real acting experience at this point, but certainly fancied himself to a would-be actor, and I guess he was considered, at least for a short time, in the lead role. Of course, that lead role eventually went to Richard Roundtree. I guess the song itself is, well, it's evocative, it's playful, it's sassy, it's funky, it's amusing, it's memorable, right? That the theme from Shaft is just one of those sort of indelible kind of cultural landmarks from the early 1970s. It has, as they say, some legs. I mean, it's still a song that people know and can hum and know some of the lyrics too. Shut your mouth kind of deal. It's awesome. It's clearly the thing that Hayes is best known for. To be fair, though, to Isaac Hayes, he had a substantial music career. He had 7 top 40 pop hits, and he put.
Well, he was essentially carrying Stax Records.
No, that's exactly right. No, that's exactly
a period.
No, that's exactly right. And on the Stax label, then he put 18 R&B songs in the top 40 R&B charts. He really was sort of the face of Stax Records. I'd say a couple things about Hayes, just in terms of his career. The theme from Shaft tends to overshadow everything else that he did, but his records from the late 60s, his LPs in particular, are unbelievable. Hot Buttered Soul, for example, is incredible, an incredible album. And the deep cuts on these albums are just amazing. He knew a good song when he came across it. And so on those albums, for example, he has a number of Backrack and David songs, his own sort of soulful take on them. It's really something. This movie, however, Shaft, we shouldn't just sort of bypass it. Dave, the Shaft was a cultural phenomenon in of itself, right? 1971 film starring Richard Roundtree.
It launched an entire new genre of film, right? The Black
exactly right.
Film, and that they were very big throughout the 70s and made several Black artists stars.
That's exactly right. This was the first major Hollywood film with a real budget that had a largely Black cast and had a Black director, the visual artist Gordon Parks, who was really more famous for his still photography. He'd had a very long career as a photographer. For example, in Life magazine, he was he was world famous, but then he kind of picked up a new career as a director. This film is really important. I mean, the whole, as you're suggesting, Dave, it starts a sort of blaxploitation movement. The entire film is really from a perspective of power. That Roundtree, as the protagonist, John Shaft, he is not beholden to anyone. He's a very powerful and even sort of threatening figure. And this film, which was shot on location in New York City, there's all sorts of interesting stories about the location shoots, has a kind of gritty edge to it that made it enormously popular. And so the theme from Shaft and the film Shaft itself, these are big moments in American life in this era.
Well, and it didn't shy away from the controversial issues either. Talked about inner city crime, gangs, drugs, Black protests, civil rights protests. So I don't know if they talked about Black Panthers as such, but Black Power movement.
Black Power, yeah. Black nationalists, Black nationalists play a very prominent role in the film, and are almost on a kind of heroic level. Yeah, David, it's a big moment. And what's fascinating about this song is that, again, 50 years later, it's still, we still have some sense of what Shaft was all about. And so at number 2 is Isaac Hayes' theme from Shaft. At number 3, then we have the, it's one of the songs of the 20th century, I suspect. It's John Lennon's Imagine. Yeah,
absolutely. John Lennon and Yoko Ono co-produced the song with Phil Spector. He commented on the track, quote, "We knew what we were going to do. It was going to be John making a political statement, but a very commercial one as well. I always thought that Imagine was like the national anthem," end quote. So yeah, absolutely. And Lennon talked about this, saying, "I learned with this song that what you need to do if you want to make any sort of political comments is you need to just wrap it up in a sugar coating, and just like Mary Poppins said, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down." And that was the idea behind this, and it worked extremely well. It was released as a single in the United States, not in the UK, strangely enough. But in the United States, it was released as a single, where it peaked at number 3, where it is this week on the Billboard Hot 100. It wasn't released as a single in Britain until 1975 to promote the greatest hits, Shaved Fish.
Yeah.
And it reached number 6 on the singles chart that year. And then it topped the chart in 1980. Why?
Well, I assume it topped the chart in the wake of his murder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This was actually written during the Let It Be sessions, and but he finished composing it one morning, early 1971. The Beatles had been broken up for a little over a year. He was on his Steinway piano in the bedroom in the Tittenhurst Park estate, Ascot, Berkshire, England. And that's also where they began the recording on May 27th, 1971. Originally, Spector wanted to do it on the Steinway in that room and record it there, but the acoustics were so bad that they moved it to the sound studios that had just been built on the property, the Ascot Sound Studios. And they finished the recording there. They did it in like three takes. It took I guess less than 15 minutes. And this is kind of parallel to the whole instant karma thing. Remember that all came together really quickly and it was done very quick. And this is not a Phil Spector way of doing things at all, actually.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
3 takes. They took the second one and then did string overdubs at the record plant in New York on July 4th. The finished recording featured Lennon on piano and vocal, Klaus Voormann on bass guitar, Alan White on drums, and the Flex Fiddlers on strings. So,
Yeah.
it was issued by Apple Records, of course, in October 1971, and it became the best-selling single of his solo career. Also drove the album Imagine to the top of the charts, reached #1 on the UK chart in November 1971. It has sold more than 3 million copies in the US, 1.7 million copies in the UK. And after it was featured at the 2012 Summer Olympics, the song re-entered the UK top 40, reaching number 18. It's ranked number 23 in the list of best-selling singles of all time in the UK. And it's just been, a world success. And everybody is familiar with the song. Anytime a tragedy happens and people come together to make music, Imagine is one of the things that they play. It's been covered by over 200 artists, including people like Queen, David Bowie, Stevie Wonder, Neil Young, Madonna, Peter Gabriel, Liza Minnelli, Joan Baez, Diana Ross, Blues Travelers, Dolly Parton, Pink, Jeff Beck, and on and on. And clearly it's a very melodic song. It's a ballad, right? But it also has deceptively subversive text. And this is something that it's a text that has been widely misunderstood, widely criticized, and partially even condemned. A lot of churches don't like the idea that you imagine a world where there's no religion, right?
Right.
So, Steve, why do you think this song is so well loved?
Well, I think it's I think it's well loved. It's I'll just put my cards on the table. The best Lennon for me is the cheeky rocking Lennon. And the Lennon who pontificates is of less interest to me. I think it is popular in large measure because it's associated with his passing. I do think it's also.
I think also really, there was a decade of Imagine reception before his passing, and it was huge and influential in the 70s.
I have to, I would say that there is also the notion that Imagine then coincided with the burgeoning global peace movement at the time. And it was a kind of anthem for the peace movement during the 1970s. But I think today it is, its ongoing popularity is largely sentimental. I don't think it's seen as a visionary song. I think it's one that's rooted very much in the past, and I think it's one that's very much rooted to Lennon's tragic passing. I mean, I can't. It's hard to argue. It's hard to argue with what you've said and what you put on the table in terms of its popularity. And I understand that it's a deeply meaningful song to millions upon millions upon millions of people. It just is a little overwrought for me. It would have. You mentioned that it was written during the Let It Be sessions. That would have been interesting. How had the Beatles taken this? would would you have had somebody like Harrison taking a little bit of the piss out of it? That might have been interesting. That might have yielded a far different. It would have yielded a far different song, and from my perspective, maybe a bit more interesting. Again, I feel like the voice in the wilderness here, but Imagine is certainly not my favorite Lennon song, but it's hard to argue. This is one of the most important songs. It's the most important song probably he ever penned, along with Yoko, and it's how Lennon will be remembered.
Well, I think that's absolutely fair, and it was his favorite single in post Beatles production. George Martin, who was generally very favorable about Lennon's solo writing, considered Imagine to be his best post Beatles song. But you're not alone in being critical. A lot of people saw the hypocrisy. Imagine no possessions. It's easy if you try. Well, this is coming from a man who wrote this on a Steinway piano in a mansion.
Yeah. Okay, but right.
So that rings a little bit hollow for some people. Of course, as I said before, the churches hated it. Imagine no religion. Imagine there's no heaven. I think this has been a little bit misinterpreted, misunderstood. Lennon himself said, quote, if you can imagine a world at peace with no denominations of religion, not without religion, but without this my God is bigger than your God thing, then it can be true, end quote. He was inspired by a book of poetry by Yoko Ono, Grapefruit, and by a book of Christian prayer given to him by Dick Gregory. And these two things came together and kind of, he said a lot of the ideas and a lot of the text came from Yoko. He just was too macho and too egotistical back when it came out to give her writing credit, but she should have had writing credit. Who knows how much of that is true, but she influenced his thinking in this direction. Very fundamentally.
Sure. I think it's absolutely right. No question about that. But you can forgive those who were put off by the song. I mean, they didn't have the annotated Lennon notes there with them. I mean, it does, I think, you can understand, this is not my position, but you can certainly understand why people would be taken aback by the song on some level, and why religious leaders of the time in particular really found it almost offensive. But
not just almost offensive, but they were like, let's forbid this.
Yeah, which is, right, which sort of then plays into the larger point that Lennon is getting at too. I mean, their reaction amplifies his point. But this is also sort of Phil Spector's last big moment. I mean, he has a career and he's continuing to work with artists on a piecemeal basis during the 70s. But these sessions, they're really important for Spector, right?
They're his comeback.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as you say, this could be kind of seen as his swan song as well.
I think so too. Yeah.
Because he's becoming increasingly erratic,
right,
difficult to work with, and although he continues into the 2000s working with artists,
that's right.
It is sporadic, as you said, and most of those artists have crazy stories to tell too.
Absolutely, no, they absolutely do. And this is an enormously successful song. And I mean, to be fair, it's not necessarily, again, a typical Spector kind of production, but there are Spector touches that make the song powerful. And it benefited from his his touch. There's just no getting around it. And it's interesting that George Martin acknowledged as much, right? That George Martin, saw this song as a kind of complete work.
Well, I would argue that this is a Spector song that comes as close to being a song that Martin could have produced as anything we'll see.
I think that's right.
We have seen.
I think that's right.
Because you have the strings, which Martin loved. He brought that into the Beatles production and so on. Yesterday, right, which would have been a really simple ballad, but with the strings, it takes it to a higher level.
Yep.
So yeah, I think typical of the reception back then is something that was in the Rolling Stone, describing the lyrics as, quote, 22 lines of graceful, plain-spoken faith in the power of a world united in purpose to repair and change itself, end quote. Jimmy Carter, and this is what I'm talking about, Jimmy Carter said, in many countries around the world, my wife and I have visited around 125 countries. And when were they doing that? They were doing that while he was president, right? In the 70s, before John Lennon died. You hear John Lennon's song, Imagine, used almost equally with national anthems. So it was already big. It was huge. It was significant, even back before he died.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's one of the songs of the 20th century, and there's just that it's just one of those landmark tunes. And again, it's this is how Lennon as a solo artist would be remembered, I think.
Well, just a few things about the reception. 1999, it was ranked number 30 on the RIAA's list. RIAA's list of 365 songs of the century. Got a Grammy Hall of Fame award. It was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, 500 songs that shaped rock and roll.
Yeah.
In the Guinness World Records of British hit singles, it was named the second best single of all time, right behind Bohemian Rhapsody. Rolling Stone, in its 2004 list of the 500 greatest songs of all time, ranked at number 3. And so on and so forth. And the list goes on and on, right? So a very significant song, as you said before, probably the single song that people will first identify with Lennon every time.
That's right. And to our credit, neither of us burst into tears while we talked about it. So that's an achievement in and of itself. So,
yes, and now we're done. So
we can both let loose.
We've made it.
Yeah, my God. So at number 3, then we have Lennon's Imagine. At number 4, it's a song that is, if it's the fall of 1971, it's the fall of 1971. This is really the song of the season. It's Rod Stewart's Maggie May, Reason to Believe. One of Stewart's, it's a signature song. Maybe it's the signature song for Rod Stewart, even all these decades later.
And maybe a slight connection to the last song that we're going to be talking about, in terms of its thematically related to the summer of '42.
Ah, yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's also one of those songs that has stood the test of time. It's it's a very different song than Imagine, but these are songs that even young people, right, in the 21st century have, I think, some inkling of. It's probably Stewart's finest hour. At number 5, yeah,
my God, Maggie May, Reason to Believe. Wow.
It's an extraordinary. It's a double A side, I guess.
Yes,
if there ever was one.
Well, and interestingly, Reason to Believe was originally the A side until disc jockeys started playing the B side, Maggie May, more often.
That's an amazing story, I think. Okay, so at number 4, you have Rod Stewart's Reason to Believe, Maggie May. At number 5, then, this is sort of the ultimate one-hit wonder. It's kind of a curiosity of a song. It's the Free Movement's "I Found Someone of My Own" on the Decca label. The Free Movement, was an R&B group out of Los Angeles. This is, I mean, to be candid, this is really sort of it for them. They never really hit with anything else of meaning. They only put one other song in the top 50, and that's a song called "The Harder I Try." The thing about this song that's curious is that it's pretty matter of fact about the dissolution of a relationship. The protagonist is at the breakfast table. His lady comes up and tearfully expresses that she's got a new lover, and he says, "Well, you know, I found someone as well." You know, this kind of thing, and it's a very kind of I mean, there's emotion there, but it's also a kind of casual nonchalance to it. It's kind of jarring in a way, but it's a smooth song. It was an enormous hit. I think people who remember the song remember it with great fondness. I confess that it didn't make much of an impression on me, and it was a completely unknown song to me. But and this, like I said, is the Free Movement's sort of, this is their one chance at a hit. But there you have them at number 5. I found someone of my own. Does it ring a bell with you at all?
No.
No, I have to confess, me neither. Well, okay, this probably will, though. At number 6, those crazy Osmonds are still on the charts. At number 6 is Yo-Yo.
Yo-Yo. Yeah. Well, the Osmonds are everywhere, right? 1970, 1971. It almost parallels the incredible success of the Jackson 5 in the same period. In fact, their first hit, most people thought, was from the Jackson 5, the one bad apple, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
So
they sell a ton of records in this era. They're just no getting away from the Osmonds in the early 1970s. But at number 7, then you've got this British artist, Cat Stevens, with very much a kind of song of the era, with Peace Train at number 7. So your thoughts about Peace Train, Dave?
Well, Peace Train was taken from the album Teaser and the Firecat, peaked at number 7, and it was Stevens' first top 10 US hit. In a 1970s concert, he introduced the song with the revelation that he wrote it while he was on a train, and he was thinking about Alfred Hitchcock. Probably thinking about the fact that so many Alfred Hitchcock films were on trains. Because the Alfred Hitchcock reference in terms of the piece, you can't come up with anything there. But all right. Wow. And it kind of became one of these songs that the peace movement seized upon and was very fond of, and I think that's one of the reasons, similar to Imagine, why this was so big at the time. It has one other interesting similarity with Imagine. Following the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001.
Oh man.
The song, like Imagine, this was placed on the list of post 9/11 inappropriate titles put out by the Clear Channel. So the Clear Channel radio stations were not to play this after September 11th, and not Imagine either. So apparently songs about peace were problematic. If Imagine had also been on the list, you might have thought that it's because of Cat Stevens' conversion to Islam, when he became Yusuf Islam,
right?
And he had some very problematic, at least, statements made about the fatwa against Salman Rushdie about the satanic verses. He said he supported the fatwa. He said Rushdie deserved to die, and that, quote, if we were in an Islamic state and I was ordered by a judge, end quote, that he would act as the executioner. When he was asked, would you go to a demonstration where you knew that an effigy was going to be burned? He replied, quote, I would have hoped that it'd be the real thing, end quote. So,
Well,
following this, there were some people who had a problem.
That's right. Yeah.
So reconciling the message of the song "Peace Train" with obviously some very hateful and violent statements.
But to be fair to Yusuf Islam, I think in recent years he has, if not recanted totally his stance, he's certainly softened it. Now,
Yes.
Again, that might be for some too little, too late, but yeah, I think I think you've captured the controversy. I mean, I think that's completely accurate. I mean, in the day, it's Cat Stevens in the early 70s was a figure of of some around. He was I think a kind of a feature, a kind of favorite of the counterculture to some degree, but he also then had a kind of middle of the road sensibility that even parents could appreciate. He was he certainly looked the part of the kind of the 70s folk singer, but many of his songs captured a sentiment that people in a kind of larger political spectrum could appreciate. He's the kind of guy that, you could spin that album in your living room and mom and dad wouldn't really be all that upset.
Oh yeah, Morning Has Broken, for instance.
Yeah.
They'd play that in churches. And so, yeah, and he had an incredibly successful soundtrack with Harry and Maude. No, not Harry and Maude.
Harold and Maude.
Harold and Maude.
Yes. The Hal Ashby film, yeah.
By the way, that was produced by the same guy that produced this album, Paul Samuel Smith. Are you familiar with Paul Samuel Smith?
I'm not. It doesn't ring a bell with me.
He was the bassist for the Yardbirds.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And
Awesome.
co-founder of the Yardbirds. And he left the Yardbirds in 66 to become a record producer. And he's produced not only some of Stevens' most successful albums, but he's also produced Jethro Tull, Carly Simon,
Wow,
Murray Head, and Chris de Burgh, among others. So,
yes.
And he produced the Harold and Maude soundtrack as well.
Yeah.
So there's that.
It's Cat Stevens is obviously a big figure in the early 1970s, and he'll sell a lot of records. So at number 7 in mid-November 1971, we have Peace Train from Cat Stevens. At number 8, we have an American group, the Chi-Lites, with Have You Seen Her? Now, the Chi-Lites, the Chi-Lites are a group that was formed in the late 1950s. They have a kind of political edge to them in the 1970s, but this song, Have You Seen Her, is not political really at all. It's a song about a man's awakening to how he was taking his woman for granted. And in a sense, it is a kind of, there's a kind of moment of self-realization in the song that is, in its own way, pretty sophisticated. Now, the song starts with a kind of spoken dialogue. It kind of ends with the spoken dialogue. There is this sense of, you get the sense of growth in the song. It's kind of interesting if you think.
Profound loss, yeah.
Profound loss, yeah.
Profound loss.
No,
I love this song. I think this is just fantastic.
There is something about it. There's a real poignancy to it. And there's also this sense, again, when you think about sort of the burgeoning women's movement that's happening at this time, it's in a muted sort of way. There's some overtures there about the importance of relationships, the importance of a kind of mutuality within a relationships. And this guy's just it's all sort of hitting in all at once. It's there's something about this song that's really quite interesting.
Yes.
but I have to confess, I did. This is another one of those songs that didn't leave an impression on me.
Really? Oh, I
No,
love it. Even back in
no,
the day.
not at all. In fact, oh, and I suppose we have to mention, we should mention that the one and only MC Hammer covered this in the early '90s and had a significant hit with it. But you have the Chi-Lites. Oh, I want to think about the Chi-Lites real quickly. The Chi-Lites made a number of appearances on Soul Train, and Soul Train again is a song out of Chicago. Don Cornelius was the host, a kind of urban American bandstand, and the Chi-Lites used
Just
these
a lot hipper.
Oh my God, just incredibly, yes, much hipper. And the Chi-Lites really use these performances on Soul Train to sort of to elevate their status, really across the country. This is how they became known. And so at number 8, you have the Chi-Lites with "Have You
I'd
Seen
just like
Her?"
to point out that there was another song from approximately the same period, a country crossover from Charlie Rich, the most beautiful girl, and it's essentially the same, thematically the same thing. The guy's looking,
yes,
he's out, he's looking for the woman who left him.
That's right.
And he realizes he made a big mistake. He really fucked up, and now he just hopes somehow he'll be able to find her to tell her.
Well, we don't think for a minute, do we, that somehow the Chi-Lites and Charlie Rich cross-pollinated, and maybe they did.
Well,
that'd be
seems
something.
unlikely.
It seems unlikely. It does seem
not
unlikely. But I think you're right. It's really very much the same kind of song. Okay, at number 9, Dave, we've got the magnificent Marvin Gaye with "Inner City Blues." Make Me Want to Holler.
Well, man, this was his year, right? Just incredible. He produced "What's Going On," a landmark album that continues to this day to have admirers, and the critics loved it. It almost didn't get put out, because this appeared on the Motown label, the Tamla label.
Tamla label, yeah, that's right.
Right, and Berry Gordy did not like the idea of any Motown artists going this.
That's right.
Critical, this controversial, right?
That's right.
Because we're talking about some real serious problems, and also about what's going on, especially about what's going on in Detroit. Detroit was a stereotypical big city in the U.S. Back in 1971, with all the inner city problems that came with that.
Oh, that's exactly right.
So when we hear "What's Going On," or we hear the Inner City Blues, we hear somebody talking very straightforward way about the problems facing folks in the inner city.
Yeah.
His co-writer for this song was James Nix Jr., and he recalled, quote, "We started putting some stuff in there about how rough things were around town." He said, end quote. He said that Marvin had already had the tune, had the music pretty much ready for that, but they were still working on lyrics. Quote, "We laughed about putting lyrics in about high taxes, because both of us owed a lot. And we talked about how the government would send guys to the moon, but not help folks in the ghetto. But we still didn't have a name or really a good idea of the song. Then I was home reading the paper one morning and saw a headline that said something about the inner city of Detroit. And I said, damn, that's it. Inner City Blues." So that's how, end quote. And that's how that got started. This is, of course, Marvin Gaye produced the entire album, including this song, and this was it was recorded in kind of a mellow funk style. Marvin Gaye on piano, the Funk Brothers, or not all of the Funk Brothers, but some of the Funk Brothers like Eddie Bongo Brown, the bassist Bob Babbitt were on this as well. And in its unedited version, as it appears on the album, the final minute of the song is a reprise to the theme of What's Going On,
Yes.
the album's first
Yes.
song. So there's segues into this dark ending. But that was cut off in the single version.
Yeah.
And so Marvin Gaye had just had 3 hits, 3 consecutive #1 hits on the R&B charts, and all of these 3 singles from the album made it into the top 10 of the Billboard's pop singles. So it was huge. It wasn't certified by the RIAA at the time, but all 3 releases gained gold status.
Yeah.
In the United States.
No, and it continues to sell. I mean, this is, I mean, we'd agree, right? This is Marvin Gaye's high water mark. This is one of the most important songs and albums of the 70s. And it was, as you're suggesting, a radical departure from the kind of music that Tamla Motown put out. And in the end, I think Marvin Gaye was, I mean, he was right. I mean, he had his finger on the pulse of urban America in a way that that few other artists did, and I think it truly changed Gordy a bit in terms of sort of what popular music could be, should be, kind of thing.
Yeah, he said that himself, and it freed up what other Motown artists could do. I'd like to read just a short blurb from an article in the Detroit Free Press by Neely Tucker. She says, quote, "In 35 minutes and 30 seconds, Gaye's album articulates more about Detroit and life in Black urban America than any pile of books and any stack of surveys could ever do." Gaye's album was also the end of Motown in Detroit. It was the last significant album recorded here before the label moved to Los Angeles. Motown's leaving was a heavy blow to the city's image, and it is no small irony that Motown's departure thereby helped exacerbate the kinds of urban problems that Gaye lamented in What's Going On.
Absolutely. No, I think it's
End quote.
Yeah. No, that's very well stated. It is very much a kind of elegy to Detroit. I mean, it's easy to lose sight of this because Detroit has been in free fall for decades. But in the 1940s, 1950s, Detroit was, one of the most, if not the most, dynamic city in the United States.
City? People, the middle class in Detroit was fantastic. The school system was exemplary.
That's exactly right. And that the Detroit's problems were actually just getting started in the late 60s, early 1970s. And I think you can argue that Detroit's problems are still, Detroit's still it's still an uphill climb for Detroit. So I think this is this is an enormously influential album. And it's one of those songs and one of those albums that bears repeated listening. And it just, as you talked about there, and as you just read, there's a certain kind of social commentary here that's profound. Just is deeply meaningful. Yeah.
Smokey Robinson said that's his favorite album of all time.
Yeah.
It's high praise.
That is for sure. That is high praise. Mr. Motown himself, right? Smokey Robinson.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's an amazing song, and Gaye really was an amazing artist. Let's just to complete the top 10 for mid-November. We have at number 10 then the brother sister duo from down in California, the Carpenters, with Superstar, and Bless the Beast and the Children. And just a word, we talked about this last month, I believe, but Dave, just got a quick word about Superstar and Bless the Beast.
Well, yeah, another one of the great singles of all time, I think. Superstar, as it was originally written, remind me, who wrote it actually?
Well, this was Delaney and Bonnie, and then Leon Russell contributed
Leon
to
Russell,
it as
right.
well. It's from an idea that I think came from Rita Coolidge, I believe, about groupies.
Groupies. In its original form, it was a little bit more hard-edged, I think.
Yes, it was.
This is much more, a romantic turn. This is someone who fell in love with the rock star and had a one-nighter with him when he was in town, and he said, "Oh, I'll be coming back." And now she's waiting for him.
Yeah, and there's
maybe not understanding what her role in the relationship was from his side of the thing.
That's right. In order to get to that, you have to sort of read between the lines in the Carpenters version, whereas in the original, I think it was everything was a bit more upfront. But it's a huge song for the Carpenters, no question about that. Massive hit for them at number 10 with Superstar and Bless the Beast and the Children. Let's cherry pick a little bit from the other songs in the charts at this time and talk just for a second about a really peculiar number from Les Crane. So at number 15 in mid-November is Les Crane's version of Desiderata. And Desiderata is essentially a poem. There are kind of backup singers, but it's a kind of, it's definitely a poem, and it's a poem about life. It's a poem about a kind of way of living. And it is wooden, it is didactic. It's also kind of strangely moving too. There's something about it that, we'll include it on the playlist. I guess you all can judge for yourselves. It's very much a kind of symbol of the times that not only that this is popular, that this kind of thing at 4 minutes and 18 seconds, that people wanted this, right? And so I'm talk about Les Crane for just a second. Dave, did this leave an impression on you at all? Do you recall Desiderata at all?
Not even one bit.
No. Yeah. So it has, I think, largely disappeared, but it is okay. So Les Crane recorded it. The poem itself was written by an American poet, Max Ehrman. The poem was in the public domain. They believed it was in the public domain. It wasn't. There was some dispute for a number of years about royalties and all of that between the Crane camp and the Ehrman camp. And so there was a kind of copyright battle that surrounded it. Eventually this gets sorted out. Les Crane himself was actually an entertainer and of some note. 1960s, Les Crane was a radio disc jockey who then made his way into television, as many people did in the late 50s and early 1960s. And he had a couple claims to fame. One, in the early 60s, he had a show called something called Crane at the Hungry Eye. Hungry Eye was a venue in San Francisco, a very famous folk venue. And Crane oftentimes would speak with folk performers before or after they got off the stage. It was a kind of late night show, unscripted, very hip, very cool. Les Crane made a name for himself. Then he made his way to television. He went to ABC and had a talk show, a late night talk show. And his talk show on ABC got a reputation as also being fairly kind of unscripted and a place where interesting things and interesting people might show up. This is, for example, the place where the Rolling Stones first appeared on American television. ABC pitted Crane's show in '64 against The Tonight Show. I think we probably know how this all played out. Crane's show stayed on the air for a couple more years. It was, though in comparison to The Tonight Show, Crane's was much edgier and quite frankly, probably a bit more engaging. Crane, for example, had a very famous interview with Malcolm X on his show. I think you can make I think that the Les Crane show was a bit like the Dick Cavett show before Dick Cavett. I mean, Cavett's show in the late 1960s, ABC famously put Dick Cavett, his late night show in competition with Carson. And Cabot's show had this reputation as, edgy and controversial, and this is where Groucho Marx would show up and where John Lennon would show up and so on. Well, Crane's show was very similar, but Crane had the misfortune of not hanging around long enough really to become famous. The poem is heavy, but it's a kind of a heavy era. I think one of the things that's so fascinating about the early 1970s is that there is this kind of almost palpable period of reflection that's happening in the country, right? That you've got so many events that the country has lived through, the assassinations, for example, the ongoing war with Vietnam, all of this, right? It's plus, the social changes. I think there's this like almost a kind of cultural moment of reflection. And so this particular poem really focuses people's attention on how they're living and how they should live. And again, it's pretty wooden in a way, but it's also, again, strangely moving. So it's definitely worth, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's definitely worth a listen. We'll put it on the playlist. But we have Desiderata from Les Crane, who, and I should just add real quickly, Desiderata peaked at number 8. So it was, in fact, a top 10.
Wow.
Yeah, a spoken word single. And again, Crane wins the Grammy for the spoken word album for the Desiderata. Okay, Cherrypicking continues. Well, it's Van the Man. Van Morrison at 41 with Wild Night.
Right. I have to admit, when I think of Van Morrison, I know the critics love him. I have a handful of songs that I like. This is one of them.
Oh, yeah.
But just generally, when I think about Van Morrison, I think about an ugly guy that just got a goddess for a wife. And then I think about the music. But that's the first thing I associate with Van Morrison. Just how good it is to be a musician. Because
I'm glad you're able to get that off your chest.
Oh, Janet Planet, she was just a goddess. All right, let's get to the song. This was on his 5th studio album, Tupelo Honey, and it was released as a single in October, and peaked at number 28. So still, it's a popular, in spite of the fact that it didn't even break the top 20. It's still a popular song, a song that his fans want to hear in concert, and he always plays it. Strangely enough, it became much more of a hit, peaking at number 3 in 1994 with John Mellencamp and Michelle. God, I just don't know. I don't know how to pronounce the name. I'm really sorry, but it was a duo, and they reached number 3 with this song. Actually, number 1 in Canada for 3 weeks. So the song has some legs, and what I find really interesting about it is who all was involved. You had Morrison, of course, on rhythm guitar and vocals. You had Louise Gasca on trumpet. You had Rick Schlissa on drums. He was a member of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band too. Jack Schroeder on the alto and baritone saxophones. Then you had people like John McPhee, pedal steel guitar, and he became a member of
the Doobies.
Yeah, the Doobie
Brothers.
Right? Yeah. But before that, even he was playing with people like Steve Miller on his Fly Like an Eagle album. He was playing with the Grateful Dead, Boz Scaggs, Emmylou Harris, Rick James, Ricky Skaggs, Crystal Gale, Mike Bloomfield, Beach Boys, Chicago, Huey Lewis. Before he got into the Huey Lewis and the News, but even then he played on the sports and hard at play albums with Huey Lewis.
Yeah.
Played with Glenn Campbell. So he was clearly a very well demanded.
Oh, absolutely.
He was everywhere. Then there was also Gary Malaber, who was also played. This was on drums for the Steve Miller Band. Eddie Money played for on Bruce Springsteen's solo work. Peter Frampton, Poco, Paul Williams, Kermit the Frog, Joan Armatrading, Beach Boys, John Lennon, David Cassidy, Bonnie Raitt, Bob Seger, Barbara Streisand, Warren Zevon, another very popular sessions player. And then you have someone like Bill Church on bass. He was in a group called Sawbuck with an unknown guitarist, the name of Ronnie Montrose.
Oh, yeah.
And the two of them left the recording for that group's first album to join Van Morrison to record Tupelo Honey.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
they were on this because they essentially left their group to come and work with him on this. And then Bill Church would go on to join the group Montrose when Ronnie Montrose became a band leader.
And Montrose then famously had Sammy Hagar as a member of the group for several years.
Right.
Yeah. So sort of a who's who.
There was a lot of power coming together and working on this single is what I'm saying.
No question. No, absolutely. And so from Van Morrison, then let's just briefly at number 42 is 10 Years After with I'd Love to Change the World. This is 10 Years After was a British blues group that had a large following in the United States, based in no small measure by the fact that they were at Woodstock. Woodstock, as we have talked about before, was good for business. If you were on stage at Woodstock, you ended up selling a lot of records for a long time afterwards, and certainly 10 Years After benefited from that.
Yeah, launched a lot of careers.
Yeah, for absolutely. It's this is probably the one song that 10 Years After is really known for. This is to suggest they're a one-hit wonder, I think, is maybe a little overstated, but this is certainly their only single of note in the United States. It's from their LP, Space and Time. 10 Years After was fueled by Alvin Lee, who was the lead guitarist, songwriter, oftentimes the vocalist. It was really very much Alvin Lee's group. I have to say this is again in an era where there's a lot of social and political commentary in songs. This is no exception. This song, however, sort of wants it both ways. It's both broadly political and then in the end sort of shrugs its shoulders. I mean, it starts off with, and it's sort of vaguely homophobic in the opening lyrics. Everywhere is freaks and harries, dykes and fairies. Tell me where is sanity. And so, again, it's a kind of plaintive attempt to sort of try to figure out what's happening with the world, why the world's spinning out of control. It does end with "We'll stop the war," but it famously, basically, the lyric from the protagonist is, in terms of changing the world, I leave it up to you to change the world. I mean, there's a sort of kind of shoulder shrug and kind of walk away. It is, however, a song that you still hear on classic rock radio, and it is very much the signature tune for 10 Years After. They broke up in the late 70s, and Alvin Lee passed away in 2013. But if you think about 10 Years After, this is the song that you come to for sure. The last song we want to talk about, speaking of melancholy, right, is. This is really something. This is at number 43. You have Peter Nero, the pianist Peter Nero, with his version of the theme from the summer of '42.
Right, and there were a number of people who covered this. It was written by a French composer, Michel Jean Legrand,
Yeah.
and he was a composer, arranger, jazz pianist. He wrote over 200 film and television scores, in addition to many other songs. He won 3 Oscars from 13 nominations, 5 Grammys, and was even nominated for an Emmy for his score of Brian's songs. And that also charted in at 56 in 1972.
Yeah.
His first Oscar was for The Windmills of Your Mind from Thomas Crown Affair.
Yeah, great Dusty Springfield song,
Yes.
among others.
And his last Oscar was for his score for Yentl
Yeah.
in 1983. So clearly he was very, very well loved in Hollywood and got a lot of work there. The main theme of Summer of 42, which was called The Summer Knows, was the actual title. Actually got its lyrics from Alan and Marilyn Bergman, who did a lot of work with Legrand. They wrote the lyrics, and then the song was recorded by vocalists from Tony Bennett and Barbra Streisand to Frank Sinatra. So this song also got a lot of mileage. Of course, it's from the soundtrack to the Summer of 42 movie.
Yeah.
And in the Summer of 42 came out as a movie first. It was written by a playwright or actually a script writer based on his own experiences. It's autobiographical.
Right.
A summer when he was growing up during World War II, and this is the story. A young man and his small clique of friends hang out on the beach in Nantucket. They befriend a young married couple. The man goes off to war. And in the time when he's gone, a friendship develops, especially between one of the friends and this woman. And on the night that she discovers that or receives the message that her husband has died in battle, they come together.
Yes.
And the next day she leaves and leaves him a letter. And that was his coming of age experience.
Right.
The novel that was based on the movie was actually released before the movie was, and became a huge a #1 bestseller in its own right.
Yeah.
Before the movie even came out. So the summer of 1971 was really dominated by the Summer of 42 as a book and as a movie. And then when this came out, it became one of the few instrumental hits to make it into the Billboard Top 100.
Yeah, the film features the luminous Jennifer O'Neill.
Oh, yes,
it was a model, cover girl model, I think, and this might be her acting debut, along with then number of really, I think, effective young actors, including Gary Grimes. And it's a very powerful film, and it's in its own way quite moving. And as you're suggesting, Dave, was enormously popular. It's this very much, I mean, the whole year was dominated by the Summer of 42. And yeah, and Peter Nero was, right, this was his stock and trade, right? These instrumental versions of movie and television themes. And he sold a lot of albums doing it this way.
He sold a lot of albums. I think he recorded 42 albums for Columbia.
It's
incredible. Yeah. And if it's a Christmas album or whatever, but yes, instrumental versions of popular songs.
And just a quick word about Peter Nero and Columbia. Then Mitch Miller was the head of Columbia for a long time, and Mitch Miller was responsible for signing a number of acts like Peter and Nero. Mitch Miller was famous for his disdain of rock and roll, and so Columbia eventually became quite famous for its artists from Bob Dylan to Bruce Springsteen. But they always had a large stable of kind of middle of the road acts. And these middle of the road acts really date from Mitch Miller's influence, and Peter Nero was among them. I mean, Columbia sold a lot of these kinds of albums. And so, well, there you have it. So if it's mid 1971, these are the hits. One other thing we want to look at, though, and that is the cover of Rolling Stone. We've talked about a number of songs of note, but Rolling Stone was a significant magazine for a number of reasons. And one of the things that made Rolling Stone interesting in this era was that it oftentimes published kind of literary works. It was, I suppose, that Stock and Trade was really about the music scene, but on occasion Rolling Stone would offer something that you just couldn't get other places, and this month would be no exception. So here we go. And so this is the cover of Rolling Stone in mid-November 1971. And Dave, you want to just talk about this a little bit? Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah, probably the single most popular and best remembered work of Raoul Duke, the pen name of Hunter S. Thompson, and this was when it came out. This was when it was serialized, right? Because
That's right.
So it was serialized in Rolling Stone. And these are, of course, the illustrations by Ralph Steadman, who was Thompson's favorite illustrator and ended up doing most of the illustrations for his work.
That's right.
Yeah, this is a classic. This is an absolute classic Rolling Stone cover because of that. And Steve is a little bit skeptical that Hunter S. Thompson and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas still has legs today. He doesn't think many people still know it. So if you're a Hunter S. Thompson fan, comment below and let us know that you still love the man.
Well, there we go. So we'll prepare for the onslaught. But again, Rolling Stone's it is sort of the cultural barometer of the time, and so Fear and Loathing is a big deal. And Hunter S. Thompson in this era clearly was a very important figure. And so there you have it. So it's mid-November 1971, and it's just
let's take a real short look at what we're going to be doing next month, because that's the year end edition, and so we'll also be taking a look at the year end chart from Billboard for 1971, and also looking at some of the events that made it the year that it was.
Absolutely. So it's going to be a big show, and so we look forward to seeing you all then. So Dave, some final words here.
Right. If you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you did, you may want to subscribe. You can do that right here. Watch some other episodes of 50 Years Ago this month. You can do that right here. And definitely you'll want to check out our playlist for this month, which you can do right here.
Absolutely. And as always, we'll include, in addition to the playlist, we include a short reading list, and always look for Stephen Daves on Twitter, Stephen Daves1 on Twitter. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Bye-bye.